Okay, so Cecilia, I believe you are talking a little bit later at DCW Frankfurt, so perhaps you can just give us a little bit of a flavour about your, what the topic is, what you're covering.
Well, I'm actually here to talk about my favorite topic in the data center world, which is heat reuse and also grid balancing. So how can we actually use all the untapped assets we have in the data center in the form of heat, but also the batteries to better strengthen the power grid. So it's a little bit like how can we go from being a power consumer to actually being a power citizen, or actually grid citizen. So this is what I'm going to talk about.
And in terms of the reception of that message, because I know sort of traditionally data centers are sort of quite protective of their power and they're mission critical, so they don't want to run out of it. But are you finding what you're talking about is getting a better reception now with the focus on sustainability and I guess the power, obviously power itself is another big issue?
I think actually the power constraints is one of the reasons why we get so much attention around this. Because the way we build, so we sort of boil the hot water from the data. So we make use of the same electricity twice and creating a system benefit in that sense. And I think this is really important. So instead of wasting all that heat, I mean, this year only we will waste about 460 terawatt hours of heat that could heat up 37 cities the size of Stockholm. So I think it's time that we start to rethink how we can actually better utilize what we're actually creating in this industry. And on top of that, besides just making use of that, it actually creates extra revenue streams.
Yeah, I guess the other sort of obvious question is you've got a massive sort of legacy data center base, and then obviously there's greenfield. I guess in the greenfield there's almost no excuse not to put heat reuse technology in. But how easy is it, legacy-wise, to retrofit these solutions as well?
Of course, that is an important question, and I think from heat reuse, it's probably much harder because you have air-cooled data centers who doesn't create this type of heat needed for district heating, for example. But when it comes to the grid balancing, I mean, all data centers normally have a genset in form of batteries as well. And connecting that to the grid and make that useful for the grid, that everybody can do.
And in terms of the data centers, I think you mentioned it, but the idea of data centers as sort of good citizens, etc. Do you think that is likely to happen over time? I mean, I've heard people say, you almost plan a new town and put a data center in the middle to generate heat and power, potentially build maybe a sort of microgrid and stuff. How likely do you think that is to happen? Over what sort of time period? Do you think that is achievable?
I think it's very likely to happen very soon, actually. I mean, if we look at this big blackdown that was happening now in Spain, I think everybody's starting to realize that the power constraints we have now in Europe, we need to do something about it. And we don't have the time to actually rebuild the grids. We have to find other type of solutions. And some of these solutions that you're talking about that actually creating energy societies, it's the same way we did with internet. So instead of having a backbone where everybody runs, you have like utilities where you can actually use and make communities out of it, and then you transport on the backbone when it's necessary. And I think that type of design thinking it's needed also in the energy world. But it's very conservative thinking and risk aversive. Yeah. But on the other hand, what's on stake is even more a bigger risk. So I think we need to take this challenge.
And do you think the data center industry itself can be trusted, if you like, to move in that direction, or does it need governments who potentially at the moment don't understand the potential, but does it need governments to be educated and then them to sort of direct the data center industry to go this route, or can they be trusted, if you like, to do it themselves, I suppose?
I think it's always better to go from the business model and sit down with the energy companies and say, how can we help each other and how can we improve our business cases together? And by doing that, I mean, normally you come to a good dialogue. But I think it's also important that the data center industry understands that we can't just approach the energy companies and say, hey, we have so much heat, can you do something with it? We have to sit together and design for that system together.
And I guess we can't have a data center conversation without mentioning AI, and presumably there's enormous potential there with these gigawatt factories, I think as they're being called. The potential there for heat reuse is phenomenal. Is that where you see a big
Yeah,
opportunity?
and I think probably because that will create also a lot of heat, probably more heat than the city can take on. So I think it's important that we start to think decentralized also. Like, how can we build data centers that actually match the heat need and see how big size that can be. At the moment, I mean, we're designing data centers up to 50 megawatts. So, and that is pretty big still.
And just finally, in terms of the education piece, because obviously there's quite a big supply chain, so are there any particular areas you're concentrating on, or are you just trying to explain to everyone? Because obviously you've got architects and consultants who maybe don't understand it, and you've got obviously power companies, you're building the data centers, the heat reuse, just how difficult or easy is it to get the message out there?
I think it's, once again, to sit down, to look at it together and collaborate. For example, on the grid balancing side, we've been working very closely with Eton on the UPSs.
Okay, yeah.
And I mean, that is one type of collaboration needed. So how can they, as a hardware supplier, work together with us and make everything work? And that is a win-win for everyone. So it's a win for Eton, for us, but also for the power grid.
Okay, it's been fantastic to chat to you. So thanks very much, Cecilia.
Thank you.